Hi everybody, I'm Zach and I like movies. And happy Pride everybody, I'm rocking out my colors. And I'm back once again with another entry in my Letterboxd Criterion Challenge for 2024. And today's prompt is prompt number 51, which was watch a movie released from Criterion from the 2020s. A movie that came out, that was released in the 2020s. And I decided on MOONAGE Daydream from director Brett Morgan. This is a documentary of David Bowie. Just all of David Bowie, not one specific era of David Bowie, just David Bowie. But I hesitate calling this a documentary because the style in which it's done, it's not really like typical music doc where there's like going through their life and their work, and there's like just spliced in like rise to fame, drug addiction stuff, it's interspersed with all the talking heads and stuff, typical music doc stuff like this. This is much more of a big big phantasmagoric fantasia of David Bowie, where it uses a lot of these vast, really creative editings and montages and sequences of Bowie's performance and his many influences and his styles to kind of like cast as wide a net and getting as much of the idea of David Bowie into one movie. And I think that is probably one of the most ambitious things you could do as a filmmaker. Especially when you're if you're focusing on one subject and you're trying to capture the vastness of that subject, David Bowie is really hard to do in just one thing. Because honestly, you could do a documentary, a biopic of David Bowie using just any of his albums. It's you could have a series of David Bowie biopics, from Ziggy Stardust all the way to Black Star, and just kind of certify my Bowie bona fides. I haven't listened to everything David Bowie, but I do love me some Bowie. I personally own Black Star and Ziggy Stardust, as most people should. I love Low. That's an amazing album. I haven't listened to all of Station to Station, but he's one of those artists I definitely need to take the time to dig into. But I also really love Bowie as an actor. He's always been such a fascinating just screen presence, and this movie and MOONAGE Daydream, to its great credit, understands this. Because have you seen him? He's so eye-catching, the way his hair, his many hairdos, and his eyes. My God, his eyes are amazing. And of course, obviously, his makeup, his choice in clothing, and it's very wild and out there. And also his wonderful use of color. It's so gorgeous and psychedelic and very trend-setting and very boundary pushing too. And the way this movie does a lot, and it is quite a lot of a movie, but it does a lot to show kind of what not really inform us on what made David Bowie new and different and literally game changing, but how about giving us a great impression on how David Bowie made people feel, and how his music just really just sort of propelled him into the limelight, even with his very spacey and psychedelic look to him. And he was and there's even these interviews of him on British TV, on British media in the early 70s, where they're he's being kind of coy and cute about his bisexuality, and not really putting a label on it. There's a fun bit where he's all done up in this glam rock stuff, in this glam rock get up and these high heels and stuff. And the interviewer's what do you say about those shoes? Are those men's shoes, women's shoes, or bisexual shoes? They're shoes, silly. And he's doing this in British media in the early 70s, when it's genuinely revolutionary to do that. And let me tell you one thing. this movie is absolutely a experience that that I really wish I caught in theaters when it was released. This came out in like 2022, and it was released in IMAX theaters. It had a big show in Cannes, and then was released on IMAXs, which, my God, seeing something like this and hearing something like this in IMAX had to have been just really overwhelming. And I am envious of that. However, but fortunately for me, I have a big TV. I have a good sound system. So I did get a really great feeling and the sound of it, because like seriously, like they're not just like, they do play the hits a lot of the time, but these are great songs. It's like, this movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes of just Bowie music, and if you love Bowie, then you're gonna have an absolute blast with this. That being said, though, I found this movie kind of underwhelming at the end of it, because and I know that it's not the point to like be an informative documentary, and I know it's not like trying to tell us and explain David Bowie, just kind of like paint a portrait of who David Bowie was and what David Bowie wanted to present in the world. But I feel like that approach isn't really worth the runtime of this movie, because this movie really loses steam, but the editing is absolutely marvelous at times. Like, near times this movie is euphoric. Like, the first 20 minutes I was in love, absolutely just swept up in just the sounds, the colors, the collage, the collaging of editing, and like a lot of the imagery here is very gorgeous and beautiful. Like there's like these shots of what we assume is Bowie just like under a spotlight, and like you have like, I think, rose petals like cascading down on top of him. It's really eye-catching stuff, and this was also like approved by the Bowie estate, so they had like a lot of access to a lot of footage that most people haven't seen, and a lot of access to Bowie's paintings too, because what this movie does try to like carry us through is that Bowie was ever shifting, and that's something I've always really liked about David Bowie, was that he was so just constantly changing himself. Like there's various different eras. You know, there's the Stardust era, there is the Thin White Duke era, and even like, it is more like when he was like more pop and was like kind of like more presentable, well, but not nearly as like more commercially appealing and stuff. But okay, so this movie had great momentum, had amazing energy, and I was like thrilled. And then by the 20-minute mark, after that 20-minute mark, I realized what this movie was going for in its approach. But then eventually the luster really wore down for me, mostly because as much as I love Bowie, I was hoping to like get into more of the Bowie that I was less familiar with. Like a lot of us who are Bowie fans, or even just like aware of who Bowie was, we know about all of his stuff in the 70s and the 80s. But a lot of his stuff in like the 90s and early 2000s, I think is like it's kind of a blind spot to me, and I was hoping it would like at least approach some of that, but it kind of doesn't. Like, it's a lot of it is like this like sort of back and sort of like hopping to and forth, like it's somewhat chronological in like his different eras and his album cycles and his hits, but also like it only lightly touches on some aspects of his personal life, like how he like or even how he like, and there's a lot of these like interview snippets that are played over that sort of like is him explaining his philosophy behind the music, but they kind of just come off like these like sort of vague profunderies, which I understand that like if you're like when you're an artist trying to explain your art, you do kind of tend to feel like at least a little pretentious. That's just like, I certainly understand that, but it felt a little too loose. It didn't feel there didn't feel like there was enough connective tissue with some of this. Like I like a like a one part where, or even like in some of the choices of the music at the time, like there's one part where he's like talking about how he's like how much he hates LA, and then he moves to LA and he lives there for like I think like 2 years, and he thinks like living in LA, being miserable in LA would like get some creative juices out of it, and like, oh, that sounds like it would be now would be the perfect time to start playing Young American, and then they don't, and it's odd. And then or even like when they started playing Life on Mars, but then they like didn't like do any of the build up in the back end, which is like the best part of Life on Mars. What? But and it's a little hard to like fully encapsulate what this why this movie wasn't fully working for me, because I feel like that is kind of part of I think my biggest problem with the movie is that it is casting too wide a net, like just trying to do all of David Bowie. Again, you can't do. That is too ambitious a move. Or like even just trying to give some, not even not give context, but like show who the very facets of David Bowie as an artist, because again, like it shows that some of the paintings he's done, it shows it is spliced in some of his performances, like on stage when he did The Elephant Man, or when he was like these various roles as an actor. And I really love Bowie as an actor because he kind of like, he didn't just bring his personality and his like whole presence, but he brought like, he had this like very great understanding of a character. And I feel like that's something that this movie doesn't quite broach when it splices in these shots from like, say, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, or like the one shot, though I think there was only one shot of Labyrinth, or like hell, even just his cameo as himself in Zoolander does exemplify what Bowie brought to the screen. And I think this doc of sorts is just kind of like more interested in showing us the image of Bowie, not like where that image came from, or what that image like represents to the artist who made them. It feels like frustratingly hollow. At least it was to me, mostly because this movie gets pretty repetitive. Like in terms of structure, there's not much structure, but in terms of the structure, it's very it gets very repetitive, because it kind of does a lot of these it hits a lot of same beats where like you have images of like Bowie in interviews, and like then it would like show performances on stage, and they're great performances, and they often play like the whole song. So like you're getting like all of ones like Let's Dance, and like him singing Cracked Actor, or like some of his Ziggy Stardust stuff, and it would like build up to this like these like incredible, like again, they know this movie knows how to build a moment where it'll like just like build, like follow along with the tempo of the song, and like build, and the editing will get faster, and it'll be so beautiful and like emotional, and then it will like kind of crescendo out and finish, and then it will like do that again in the next like 15 minutes. So when the movie finally does finish on the performance of The Sun Machine, with like images of the Black Star music video, when it's coming it doesn't land nearly as hard, because it did this kind of explosive finale thing like 3 times already. Like it easily could have ended when it was doing Goodbye Space Boy, but it doesn't. It just kind of kept going. And I think because there's so much of it that is like so much of Bowie's life that is glossed over, it feels even more like an odd. It just feels like an odder choice, frankly, in my opinion, because like again, there's so much of like 70s Bowie and 80s Bowie, and like there's not much. There's like a barely a glimpse of like his stuff in like the 90s and early 2000s. They don't mention his first. They don't mention his first wife at all. I don't think they even mention his kids. Since one of them is like a film, so one of them is a successful filmmaker. They like it does mention that he married Iman, and then like you just kind of skip forward and then he dies, and then he's dead and they show him Black Star, and it's frustrating because like you're trying to like capture as much of Bowie as an artist as possible, and you're leaving stuff on the table, and the pacing of it is like just so stop and go, so it's stop and go. It doesn't I don't know. It was working for me, and then it stopped working for me. And eventually it just felt like an overlong tribute video more than like any cinematic experience, which I feel bad saying, because like there's clearly a lot of work went into this. The editing is like at times has moments of pure brilliance, and the sound is marvelous. And again, this had to have been amazing to see in a theater, especially in IMAX. But as my experience went, I was wowed, I was amazed until I wasn't, and then it just kind of felt too familiar with the Bowie I know, and too repetitive with that Bowie I know, and I kind of wished it was a little more. I honestly do wish it was informative, but I understand that's not the point. It's just this like big, as Bowie said, this like inexhaustible supply of extracurricular thoughts all jumbled into one. And I loved what it was going for. I just didn't think it was as strong of the movie that it could have been. But that's just me. I don't. But again, this is all just my opinion, and that's kind of just my thoughts on Moonage Daydream. I definitely would recommend this. It's streaming on HBO Max right now, and Criterion released a physical copy of this, I think also in 4K. It should be out it should be out now. I can't exactly remember when that was being released. But that's my thoughts. And if I have to recommend a Bowie movie, I actually have the perfect one. And it is, where is it? And aha, here it is. So this is The Man Who Fell to Earth. This is a movie. This is Bowie's first movie, his first lead role, and it is a movie by a great Australian director, Nicholas Roeg, where it's basically Ziggy Stardust, the motion picture. You know, it's alien comes to the planet Earth, and becomes a rock star. And it's so weird, it's so fun, and it's a wild ride. There's a scene where Bowie and his wife are like they're like playing in bed, but they're also like having this foreplay with a gun. It's super weird, and I love it. And yeah, easily recommend this to anybody, especially if you love David Bowie. I mean, this was definitely made as part. This movie is kind of what I was saying earlier. Like, you could have, like, this was the Ziggy Stardust movie. You could have went on and made like a Thin White Duke movie, and so on. Like, that would have been amazing. But again, I'm rambling by now. Comment, like, subscribe. What did you think of Moonage Daydream? What's your favorite David Bowie album? And yeah, David Bowie, eternal artist. David Bowie forever. Love that I lived in the time that he was alive, and even though I was disappointed with this movie, I think it really did its best to capture as much of David Bowie as possible, and as impossible as that feat may be. So yeah, I'm Zach. I like movies. I have a lot of other movies to watch, and I hope you watch movies too. And I will see you next time.